Did have 2 comments submitted through the website. Can I just read the comment or excerpt from it? So we have a comment from Mark Arsenault. I'll read it real quick. The city of Sanford, being one of the larger cities in the state, desperately needs a newspaper. Not everyone in our aging population is on Facebook or even on the internet. I do not have cable TV due to the expense. Many people in Sanford work out of town and thus are not hooked onto the local network. In addition, many new people have moved to the area. How do they get familiar with the goings-on? The local radio station does a very poor job of local news reporting. We the people need local information. This became even more essential during COVID. Shouldn't accessibility of local newspaper be essential, required part of our city as we move forward? This is something to which we can comment now, or no, we can choose to, right? Go ahead, Kim.
I had the same comment.
Or Joan, sorry.
I had the same comment from one of my friends that it's an elderly person, and she was very, disappointed that we don't have a newspaper anymore. And, like she was saying, a lot of people don't get out, and older people, they're not really into the internet and things, so they don't have access to what's really going on in town. But, I would like to affirm that.
Thanks, Joan. Other comments?
Well, we've got
Jack?
the Sanford Springvale News, and you can sign up and get it delivered to your home.
I think that's true, too. So Sanford Springvale News is a newspaper option. I think you can sign up and get it delivered to your home. I know I'm online, but...
That's pretty much just Sanford and Springvale happening, so...
Yep, and that has been a relatively recent phenomenon in the last 6 months.
Over a year.
I'm getting old, so time goes by faster than I think it does. Okay, so Sanford Springvale News is a great option for that. As far as it being required, obviously, that's nothing the city, the municipality can't really...
That would be my only comment. I don't know if there's anything this charter committee can do about that.
And it's certainly not related to the charter. Right.
And newspapers have gone away across the country. It's not just us. It's unfortunate, it really is.
We have another public comment from Diane Conley. Diane Conley, Springvale resident. I just saw this, so I have not had a chance to look at it. Please revisit section 206.1 along with section 507 compensation. In my opinion, these 2 sections are self-serving. Councilors and committee members should not be voting on their own stipend. A separate group or committee should make that decision. Section 701 and 704 lower the 25% gubernatorial voter participation threshold. It's too high. I have addressed City Council 3 times over 6 years. The last time Councilor Hurley stated that it might be too high. Recorded at a council meeting. Needs to be lowered. Suggestion maybe 18%. Section 602.1, 605.1, 606 marked reversed. Why? Thank you for your time. So quick comment on this. We haven't gotten to sections 6 or 7 yet, but we will note these when we get there. If that's okay with everybody.
Will that be in the next packet? Because I didn't see that one.
I just got this handed to me as we walked in, so I think, will this be included in the next packet, Steve?
Yeah, so all of those comments, we'll put those into the next packet, so it'll be there for the public record. Good.
What was the 200 one?
206.1.
Okay.
So that is one where we can revisit. Let's go ahead and do that now, if that's okay. I see we're already turning pages.
Yeah, we had no comment, as I remember, on that one.
Quickly, 206.1, real brief statement, just says compensation for the city councilors shall be fixed each year by the city council. So I understand the nature of Diane's comment. What I don't know, just to get the conversation started, if we need to have a conversation here, is exactly what we would do about it. We would have to have another committee to set compensation for the city manager, or excuse me, for the city councilors and the mayor. So it's noted, but I don't see a lot of energy around that.
Well, it's difficult, I think, because there's no position in Sanford that's supervises them other than the voters. So I would think that the checks and balances on this one would be if the counselors were voting themselves in raises, the voters would
Then we
change
could
out the
vote-
counselors.
then we could
if
vote
they
the
weren't happy
counselors
with
out.
it. So, but I
They
don't
certainly
know. I
don't
know if
get
anyone else
paid a
does it.
lot either.
Now, again, in reference, I think city councilors get paid $4,000, and the mayor gets 25% more per the charter than the city councilors do, so that's $5,000. That has been fixed for at least 6 or 7 years. I could see the potential for this being self-serving, but to your point, if it became that way, then you would just vote the councilors out in that case, I think. So,
The other difficult point about that is, right now, unless you get into revisionary aspects, the city council is that legislative authority that's approving the budget.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the legal ability to extract one item out of there pursuant to the rest of the municipal budget as well as the school budget as well.
okay, thank you. So, Diane, I note the concern, but I don't think this committee has the ability or wherewithal to address that, and I'm not sure what we would do anyway.
I think
Is
it was
that
out in California that some of the city councils were approving, pretty high rates for the council. But I mean, it's been like that for decades here. And I think if they start raising it, then people are going to start voting councilors off.
I think so.
Yeah, same point. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Is that included in the budget committee?
Yes, it is included and reviewed by the Budget Committee. And so, but the way that would, technically what happens there is the Budget Committee simply makes recommendations to the council who go ahead and make the vote. So the Budget Committee, we're going to get to the Budget Committee. Budget Committee has no actual authority. The authority relies in the council anyway. So it ultimately goes back to the council.
Okay, at least it would keep it under review.
True. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I'm not sure what Matt's and my position is today. We're supposed to listen or comment, but it's hard for me not to comment. School committee has the same scenario in 5.07. And I always like to say that we work twice as hard for half as much, so I'd be happy to have this discussion. But I also think you got to be careful on whether you're making some minor revisions or major revisions to the charter also. I think you're getting into some deep stuff if you go down that path.
We can't do revisions at all. It has to be
Exact-
amendments. so.
Right.
Yeah, and just for our purpose of this committee is going to be, we're going to be basically compiling several recommendations that then go to council, and then they make the decisions on that. Regarding the other two items in there, I will try to remember to, as we get to the sections that she is referring to, I will try to go ahead and make sure that we address those as we get there.
We should include it as comments,
Yeah,
no matter what.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. So are we all okay just moving to I think the next, sorry, we can't move on. Sorry, that was public comment. So next is approval of the minutes for the March 23rd and March 28th meetings.
I'll move to accept the minutes of the March 23rd meeting.
Okay, second? We don't really need to, this isn't a formal meeting, so we really don't have to go through the motion in the second and all that, I don't
No?
think. I don't think so. I think that was established at the beginning, so, we have any issues with the minutes from the 23rd and the 28th meetings?
I do on the 28th.
Okay,
I have a few comments. My first comment would be, let's see, I guess it's page 3 of the minutes where we talked about section 201. It says we had a discussion of whether to increase the full city council from 7 to 9. I thought we had more than a discussion. I thought we had a consensus that 7 was working quite well and that we didn't think it was necessary to move to 9. I don't know if that should be added in there.
so I read that differently, I just read that the discussion was had.
Okay.
Section 201, City Council,
So I
page
put-
13 of my packet.
Yeah, I put in the notes, discussed 5 versus 7, consensus keep as 7.
Yeah, we definitely had I agree with you. We had the consensus to keep it at 7.
I just think that puts it to rest if we say that.
Okay.
Rather than having to revisit it. Discussion, we revisit it.
And how do we then make an edit to these minutes then, Steve or Larissa?
You can let us know what the amendments are, and then.
Okay.
Maura's keeping the minutes?
Okay.
We'll get them amended.
So if we can amend the minutes to reflect that we decided on 7, that would be great.
Consensus on 7.
Yep.
The next one, to be on the next page, section 205.10. It says we had no recommendations, and I think this came from Steve. We talked about adding order and resolution into that language, because it would be unusual for them to pass an ordinance asking for, what was it, on an investigation or having people show up to testify?
205.10? You're saying to add order and ordinance to the definitions page?
Order or resolution? No, into that section, as I remember. Let me find it.
I thought it was definitions.
I know that we're going to put a formal definition of ordinance and a formal definition of resolution, and a formal definition of order,
In the definitions.
those three into the definition.
Right.
And then add it into that section. Yeah.
But as it pertains to 205.10, where you're doing investigation, would recommend active ordinance, because that's all the public hearing. Legally, hearing. They're entitled to be here.
Yes. So the language in that would remain the same, and then we would just define the order, resolution, and ordinance in the definitions. Okay, good, good. We can probably leave that alone then. Let's see, the next one was, and this may be my misunderstanding of the discussion we have, 212.3. It says we had a recommendation to change the word may to will, and that's if there's a vacant, if a city council seat becomes vacant. Right now, it says the city council may appoint an interim counselor. I thought it was more of a discussion. I don't know as putting will or shall in there is the right way to go. Certainly, there could be circumstances where they may not want to appoint someone, either late in the year, or I don't know what else might come out. I would think more of a should, but I thought it was a discussion. I don't think we came to a recommendation on that one.
Yeah, I guess I agree with that. I don't remember being definitive.
So my notes are, consider the timeline and process to appoint as being added in here. So I know for this coming council meeting on Tuesday night, city council is going to discuss either appointing for John Tuttle's absence and/or holding a special election. So there's nothing in the charter right now that recognizes, the council's ability to hold a special election, although they legally can. So I had to go get a legal opinion on that. It's called out in Title 30A, and we've got that reference in there. So they do have that as an option legally now, but it's not something that's laid out or put in the charter here. And I've had charters before that have a specific timeline, that if it's greater than 60 days out, they can hold a special election. If it's within the 60 days, there's still time frame to have it at the next regular election, although with a shortened time frame for paper submittals and such under that. So this is very open-ended.
Yes, I
But
think we just
it is
need to
now, but
revisit.
if we, to your point, the minutes make it look like we made a decision to change it to will,
Yeah.
right? And I think,
There's a lot more going on there that we have to.
so if we could reflect that in the minutes, that is an open-ended, that is not a decision that was made. I don't know how we can reword that exactly.
I have
Possibly just-
scheduled to discussion.
Probably just discussion on filling a vacant seat on
Okay.
the city council, something like that.
So, sorry, Jonathan.
Consistency, the school committee says within 30 days, they'll fill a position.
Okay. All right, so that can be noted there. But, so we can come back to that for further discussion.
I think
Again, just
that's
change
the
the
point.
wording
We
of
can
it to
come
make,
back to
to make it less, like it looks like we made a final recommendation there.
And then just one more.
David, this is awesome because I did not look this closely at the minutes.
It's section 301. We had no recommendations down there, and I have notes that we discussed cleaning up the transitional language in that section.
Yes.
And that's all I had.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
In my notes, same thing as about cleaning that up, so 301, basically you retain the first sentence and strike everything beyond that.
Okay, so we can get that added? More, David?
That's it.
That's good? Thank you.
Is that enough, or-
Thank you. No, it's definitely enough. All right, so the finalized meeting schedule. This came up in between meetings too. We initially had discussed a every other week schedule, and then when we did the schedule for review last week, when it came out and we agreed upon it, I think we may not have all necessarily looked at the dates on here because they aren't necessarily every other week. So do we have, on page 12 of my packet, which was from the minutes, we have the meeting dates, today being the April 4th meeting, so next meeting would be April 11th, which is next Monday. Do we have any reasons for change there? Obviously, we can have members be absent or Zoom in if they need to. Okay, very good. We're all okay with the meeting schedule as it is. All right, we're going to get into discuss Articles 4 through 7 then.
Mr. Chairman, Paul
Yes.
Demers here. Just want to check in and say, sorry I'm late. I'm on island time.
Is that Paul?
Yes. Paul
Paul,
Demers. I'm on.
are you by the pool?
No, actually, my wife is. I'm stuck in the condo.
Okay,
So, I apologize for being late.
no
Had
problem.
internet troubles.
Okay, I see you there. So we're going to go to section 4 of the charter. We're starting with section 401. Any comment on section 401? (402) I have too many pages and notes in front of me. Okay. 402 so we'll go to section 402.1. I think we can move fairly quickly through some of this here. Should I be waiting for people to read, or can I assume that it's already been read? I don't want to move
I've
too
been
quickly.
through it. I don't know if everyone has.
Okay. Let me know if I'm moving too quick then. did I say 402.2 already? 402.2, 402.3, 402.4, 402.5, 402.6, 402.7, 402.8. Look how fast we're going. 402.9, 402.10, 402.9.
On 402.9, I feel like we're at an auction here. 402.9, oh, I bid.
Sold.
After the last comma,
Sold.
the last sentence, the last comma, are faithfully executed. I had faithfully and equitably executed. So the reason, well, now I don't know if this is worth putting out there for public vote just on that, but there has been difficulty in making sure that there's equity as far as administration of some of these elements. So it's probably not worth putting out there because you'd have to do this just as a separate vote just on this one spot. But
And we would probably also have to add equitable to the definitions, and then we're in a,
yeah, right. Yeah. All right, so I'll hold.
I
okay.
could live without that, yes.
402.10,
Well, you got the budget in there about adoption of the voters, which,
right.
which is something we have to discuss, I think, later on.
So I think 402.10, we need to note as a discussion item as it relates to the Budget Committee and the adoption by voters. So subject to any changes we would make in following sections. 402.11. 402.12. 13.
I have questions on this one.
13.
Yes. I couldn't believe it, that, do we have a purchasing agent for the city?
Purchasing policy.
Who
Act
does
as a
all-
purchasing
Who does all the
agent.
purchasing?
Depends on the department.
Yeah, so we have, the city has a very extensive purchasing policy. So each department manager is responsible for the purchases inside of their particular department. And then they fill out a PO that gets submitted to finance. Our finance director also oversees the administration of those. Pursuant to the purchasing policy, there's the ability for waivers and amendments and such under that, that's spelled out. I have some authority to make amendments or waivers in there if there's lack of ability to get competitive bids, or if it's a single source or something of that nature. Elements that are above a certain dollar level, then it comes to the council as far as approval of a contract and such under that. So we operate under purchasing policy, but the departments are handling that for each of the individual departments. And then again, it flows to finance from there.
So Joan, I read .13 as saying, because this is all related to the city manager is the ultimate purchasing agent. He acts,
With all the duties that he has, wouldn't it be more economical and more feasible to have a single purchasing agent for the city and the school? No?
Whole other department position that you pay for. When the departments handle it themselves, that's within a department function. As soon as you hire a purchasing agent, that's a brand-new person, brand-new position, brand-new, have to pay for health insurance, vacations. So it's another cost that it is not necessary because the departments handle it efficiently with the oversight and check capabilities of the finance department and the city manager.
and ultimately, if you had
It's all
that,
in the budget, too.
wouldn't it still go through you anyway?
Yeah, so think of it this way. So it's centralized in that it's encompassed in an overarching policy, right? And then the responsibilities are doled out at various levels. I mean, there's individuals below the department managers that have the ability to make purchases up to $5,000, especially if a speed release has been pre-generated for them and such. So there's a whole system to it. So it decentralizes the activity of actually making the purchase, but the overall oversight and the checks and balances is centralized via the policy, and ultimately comes back to the finance department as the last step in the process, ensuring that the department manager that signed off on that PO has assured that the funds are available for that purchase in the area as allocated, and finance does a secondary check on that.
I know the city of Dover has, a separate purchasing agent that does everything from fire trucks to toilet paper. And to me, that makes more sense because even though each department has a requirement, they don't have the time to go in and go to see, where's the Best Buy, or where, or things like that. And they would also have, the ability to, and the time to probably save a lot of money. I don't know. To me, that makes more sense than having, 15 or 20 different people?
So can I just point out, I don't think I think the more you micromanage the government through the charter by demanding a purchasing agent, we've determined that it's more efficient not to do that. And so if you want to guide it in the charter, that means you're demanding that position, demanding it be funded over anything else. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting point. We have to decide where the bounds of the charter should be. And I would say not to micromanage that. That would be my opinion, so.
So again, if I can speak to it further, so anything up to $5,000 can be purchased without using competitive bids or a competitive bid process. Starting at from $5,000 to $10,000, there has to be a minimum of 3 bids, 3 quotes. I'm sorry, 3 quotes. Anything $10,000 and above goes to competitive bidding. The issues that we've had, this isn't the part of the policy isn't broke, but we have had issues over the last couple of years during COVID and such getting competitive bids, right? They just, you end up with one bidder, and then pursuant to the policy, you start negotiating because they're the only game in town. But really, that part is not broke. Our department managers are trained in that. They put that out. We do competitive purchasing with the school, like for electricity and fuel oil and things of that nature. We combine our efforts. School department has their own cooperative purchasing on supplies and such into that, and as does the city. The regional planning office puts that out, and we get those supplies through local vendors and such. So there's no lack of bidding the processes and seeking the most competitive bid and such into that. It's just, again, I reference it, it's centralized by policy and through finance, but it's distributed out over a multitude of people pursuant to that policy.
But if the
Mr.
city
Chair?
wanted a purchasing agent, you could create that position, right?
The council could create that position.
Hold on, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
thanks.
Bob.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to apply a little bit of Murphy's Law here, also with regarding, and I know we were just clarifying the minutes, but, Murphy's Law saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think we've got a long history of purchases here. I mean, there's a lot of oversight, as probably most of everybody can imagine. There's a whole web of oversight in purchasing, and yeah, the buck stops with the superintendent, the city manager. But so I don't think this is broke. So, and I think as we go through the review, it might behoove us to look at things and say, is it broke? Do we need to fix it? And if not, then we come back and discuss it. But right now, I don't think our purchasing situation is broken. I think there's plenty of oversight. History tells us that each division, let's call it the municipal division and the school division, is doing an excellent job monitoring their expenses. As we go through the budget process, we can see that. So, anyways, my comment. Let's maybe a little bit of Murphy's Law here.
Thank you. Joan, so I don't feel really strongly on this particular item. I still think it's a good discussion, though, because I think what Maura said, I think that's good for all of us, too, because there's the charter and what we can sort of demand in the charter, and then there's everything that goes on under it. So where I might kind of look at things the same way as you is when we get to the budget. So I may look at it and say, I think things should be done a certain way, and then I have to stop myself and realize, what, that's not my job. There are certain big things that we can sort of look at here, but when we get down into the littler things is when we sort of have to leave it to the individual departments. That's just how I see it.
My concern was that this might have worked for now, but in 10 years, we won't. It'll be 10 years before we revisit this. And I feel that there's going to be a lot of progress, and I feel that the city is going to be growing a lot in the next 10 years, probably more than ever before, with the influx of immigration.
I'd like to.
That's where the city manager would recommend to the city council, we need a purchasing agent.
Okay,
I'd like to think that it would work that way when the time came.
and then it would be changed from that point. Okay.
Paul has his hand up as well.
Charter doesn't have to.
Just a quick question. Does the school department have a purchasing agent?
Does the school department have a purchasing agent?
We do not. We have a similar process that the city used that flows through our business manager and the departments coming up, then ultimately it falls with me.
Thanks, Matt.
That makes sense to me. I concur with Lance on that as far as letting the system work.
Joan, are we okay moving on?
That's a good explanation why it is the way it is.
Yep. Okay. So we, it's a good discussion. I think we can move forward, though. All right. 402.14,
Does the school department use the same attorney? They have their own?
School is a specialty, all of it on its own, I would say.
thought
Wouldn't you
so. I
guys?
just-
Yeah, you're special.
Well, I'll note that school department uses Drummond and Woodson, that I know specializes in school departments. So that's a great choice. We use Bernstein Shore on the city side, who has an entire division of municipal practices and such. And inside of that, there's all of the specialties. So there's one attorney with a backup that I use on personnel issues. There's another attorney that I use just on bonding and tax increment financing. There's a lead attorney that we use on municipal and generalities and such under that. We're doing a FOIA lawsuit right now. There's a special attorney that just handles those. So that's the nice thing about the big firms, except for you spent a lot of time signing off on, oh, somebody in our firm, 30 years ago, 12 tiers down, also represented such another person that's associated with such a project. Yep, yeah, it's not a conflict, sign.
this is not related to this particular item, but since I have you both here, and I know there's been commentary about how you have done this at some points with various things, I'm thinking about Public Works. It could come up as a citizen, it could come up to say, could there be any scale achieved by having the same attorney or by having the same, not the attorney specifically, but, or is it really the DOE and like they really have to be looked at as separate things? I don't even know if I'm being clear with the question.
There wouldn't be any cost savings if we shared the same attorney.
Attorney was just one example. If
And
more
when I say
resources could be
attorney,
shared across both.
It's a firm, right? So
It's an hourly thing or whatever.
So where do we share, maybe giving them an idea of where we do
I just picture
share
this coming up in the
services.
public. Yeah.
Where
Well,
do
like
we share services?
in school construction, right? So there, both the city and the school were involved in that, because ultimately the city holds the bond, ultimately. School department is paying for that. And when we looked at bond counsel, we made the decision to go with the school's representation, Drummond and Woodson, because they specialize in that. They had an attorney that did, school construction bonding, day in and day out. Way too many details, bond counsels. But, so that, that you made the decision. They had the highest specialty in there versus the firm that we were using.
But like we do fuel, we work on fuel together.
Fuel, electricity, things of that nature. yeah.
That's what I was looking for. What,
That's what I thought you were looking for. So yeah, so there's a lot that the city and the school do. We actually, you've heard in prior meeting how much Portland kind of envies our relationship. I don't know if you guys saw that meeting, but they somewhat envy our relationship because we actually do work together. Is there conflict? Of course there's conflict. There's always conflict. But I think for the most part, we work well together. So, and that's part of what we do.
thanks, Jonathan.
Probably an area of greater concern is the audit that Whipley does for both the city and the school, so that as taxpayer goes, the dollars are under one umbrella.
Thank you.
And we both get to listen separately to our boring audit presentation, correct? Yeah.
Jack, did you get your comment resolved?
Yeah, I was just curious if they had separate attorneys.
Okay.
So I just, case in point, a boring audit is a good audit.
All right.
Some not so boring audits in the past.
402.15. 403. So this is from
If you'd like to take something away, take this, please.
403? Well, I had from the stuff that we received from the general code.
Right.
This was flagged. In section 403 requires the city manager to provide citizens with access to public information with the city. It is not clear what public information with the city means. I think that's more of a grammar comment than anything. With the city, 3 lines from the bottom. To provide citizens with access to public information with the city, within the city.
Probably within the city.
About the city, or?
Well, by law, you have to name a Freedom of Access Act officer. I don't know if this is doing that.
Yeah, so the city manager's office serves as the ombudsperson.
That was me.
Yeah.
2002. Make it not feminine or
No, it's good though, because, you know, and FOIAs get distributed, they may hit a particular department. They may hit the city clerk's office with it first. They may come through the public portals first. Almost never do they start with my office, but, so they'll get to me, and then I have to process the FOIAs from there, so.
I think when we wrote this in 2002, 2003, I think it was because there was so much confusion about where people would go for information, and there was a lot of pawning off the questions within City Hall. It was kind of pushing people around quite a bit, and there was a lot of frustration. So this is a really good example of trying to solve a problem with the charter that really needs to be solved internally. So this, I would agree with the city manager, this is the right thought process, that there should be some ability to help a citizen and not have them running around City Hall confused. However, does the charter need to do that, or does the city manager need to make sure that happens? And same with the superintendent of schools. So the thought was good. It's a little micromanagey within the charter, and this is actually a very good example of going a little too far with your charter. It hasn't harmed anything necessarily, but there's a lot of attempts to make sure this section is taken care of, and it ended up, instead of having an employee serve that purpose, it ends up being the city manager, because it's just the easier way to do it. And then he directs people how to behave with the public and how to make sure their questions are answered, so it doesn't fall on his plate. So
are you interpreting that as this isn't a responsibility that can be delegated? That Steve has to do that?
no, or his or her designee. So it can be
It says
delegated.
or designee, so, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily have to be doing it if.
Well, so
just works out
I am
better.
the named FOIA officer
Yes.
for the city.
Yep.
They're just getting more
Congratulations.
frequent and more absurd, right? So it's just, it's nuts in that realm. So, but usually it's my office, you know, we have to work across multiple departments to extract the information, to collect it and such into that. There's, you know, hey, if it's anything that's going to be $100 or greater as far as the fees we're allowed to collect, I'll notify you of that ahead of time. You're going to pay me ahead of time before we pull all the information, extract and send it. If it's under $100, we're going to extract it, we're going to send you a bill, hopefully you're going to pay it. But, so, yeah, fine.
Does it work well in your city, in your school? Do you do it, serve it as well?
Yes.
So what's the energy around this section?
You know, I
Could
agree
it
with
be-
Steve. If I was to cut, it's innocuous, really.
So
Paul has
the
his
comment
hand
could
up
be
as
to
well.
just strike section 403 altogether.
It could be, but do you want to waste an election vote on it? It's kind of innocuous at the same time, so.
I
He's
don't-
figured out how to
I
resolve
don't
it.
see how you get it out of, you know, quote, my office or Matt's office. I don't see
Where
that.
would you put it?
They have to do it anyway. So.
Okay. So no real energy around this. Or energy, but no.
I think it's a great, no, I wouldn't take it out. I don't know how anybody else feels. However, this is a great example of being careful what you put in.
Something that should have not been,
Right.
looking backwards, something that shouldn't have been put in to begin
And
with.
we tried really hard, that first charter committee, to not do stuff like this. And for some reason, this was such a frustration that we ended up putting it in.
Well, and I go back to Joan's earlier comment, you know, about the consumption of time. Purchasing is not it. This is it. Right? It's FOIA.
Paul.
FOIA.
Yep. Just a simple solution possibly, instead of shall appoint, how about if we just changed it to may? And that gives the flexibility that if either of the departments want to have someone fulfill that role, they could appoint them in the future.
I think you can now, right?
Can now, yep.
Well, but the shall infers to me that they had to appoint somebody.
Are you talking on the third line? The function of the ombudsperson shall be?
Second line.
I believe, yes.
Oh, shall
his or her
act as
designee
ombudsperson.
Shall act as, yeah,
But it says the city manager
is acting.
or the
in that
superintendent or his or her designee shall act. So it gives them the option.
Okay.
So somebody
I'm fine.
shall act.
Okay. Somebody.
I think the idea of that position is good in the sense that if you have staff that isn't, directing people correctly, you've got someone they can turn to. And to me, that's the city manager anyway, so.
Okay. All right. Are we good? Oh, go, Jonathan.
And overriding theme here, and Mara remembers this, is if whatever changes you want to make, make sure there isn't something out there that somebody puts up 100 vote no signs around town. So be careful what you ask for in this. If you want revisions, pick just a handful and
Yeah, well, we're already faced with the situation where every revision that we make has to be voted on individually, right? So we have to be careful at how many of these votes that we want to have.
Yeah, and
People aren't going to want to read through it all. They're just gonna be
Right.
yes, 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 or
No.
Yeah,
even if we remove that completely, we're still looking at the two Freedom of Access Act designees, even if there's nothing in the charter. And that's what you're saying takes the time.
That takes the time, yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, we have FOIA anyway.
All right. I don't think we have entered, I think we can move
Move
on.
on.
Unfortunately, I don't think there's much we can do to help.
Sorry, Steve.
It was tongue in cheek. Take it.
should be the one saying I'm
Take it.
Section
The
4.
last sentence in that, before you move on.
Okay.
Mr. I'm over here, sorry.
there we go.
Sue Cody,
Hey,
City
Sue.
Clerk. The last sentence, the office of the city ombudsperson shall be clearly and conspicuously marked within the city hall. I mean, I don't think that's done. We know where it is. Yeah.
So here's one that we, again, do we want to put that out there for somebody to have to vote on? Do we just leave it as it is? Do we try to strike it?
Leave it as it is.
Leave it as it is.
Leave it as is.
Thanks, Sue. Okay. 404, vacancy in the office of city manager. All right, that's the end of section 4, which we are supposed to have gotten done last week, so we're 45 minutes behind. Article 5, section 501, Board of Education.
So I think my first comment was, it was brought up, I think, in our first meeting, about the use of the terminology was selected by legal counsel recommendation when the Charter Commission was working on
The school
this.
committee legal counsel, yep.
So I just, it pitched back over to Matt and the school board to look at that terminology as to relevant, as to its current relevance and its use in here. Because like I say, Board of Education here and after referred to as a school committee, just making sure we've got all that terminology correct.
Right, and if anything needs to be clarified under definitions, we're starting to think that some of this stuff, rather than having a separate vote, if it can be clarified in definitions, we're gonna definitely have definitions, and that can be one big vote.
So there's references to the school committee, the school board,
School committee is the Board of Education, and then there were two. It was in my minutes.
Yep.
There were two that, could we clarify a lot of this with that? But that's something for the school to really keep its eye on in this section, is making sure the terminology is
And do you
clear.
really need the 2 terms? And if so, why is it necessary? I think that's something that we talked about.
Yeah, and, should we make sure, does there need to be some clarity, and can it be done in the definitions?
So here's where I'm surprised that we have input on this, but the whole members of the school committee shall be elected for a term of 3 years and shall serve until successors are elected or qualified. And that also, the school committee shall consist of 5 members. So in theory, I mean, do
You need 7.
do either of you, is 5 members appropriate? Should there be 7, 3, 9, 25?
I wouldn't go back to 3. 3 is a dangerous size for a board.
again, are you looking for a problem or are you looking for a solution? It's worked for as long as I've been around.
It's a question from your perspective of whether you feel like that there's a problem. Whether you sit around in school committee meetings saying, oh man, I wish there were 7 of us, or I wish there was only 1 of us, or 3 of us, or
Thought that many
the
times.
1. Yeah.
I've never thought, I wish there were 7 of us.
Okay, so this is a not broke, don't fix it thing. Matt, did you have a comment? Sorry.
I
No,
just
okay.
need 3.
Okay. You just need.
Well,
the
even, Steve and I, so if we watch, I mean, the best example of where the problems with 3 occur is if you look at the small board of selectmen that we have surrounding us. And those are not good, there's not a good situation there when you only have 3 people and what can happen with just one little election. And it's just, the worst kind of government is a 3.
Takes
we've had
2.
this-
Takes two people. If you have a board of three, it takes two people.
You have two people making every decision, right?
Well, right now, we have 5, I just need 3, is what I was saying.
You just need a minimum of 3.
Yep. But five's a little better than 3, a lot better than 3. And I don't think 7 is much different.
Right.
Like, it makes a big difference going from 3 to 5, 5 to 7, not so much.
Okay. Anybody
Have you
feel-
ever had a problem with a quorum with the school board?
No, we, typically, we don't. We're able to always work through that, to always make sure we have a minimum of 3. Oftentimes, we have 5, and oftentimes, and if not, we have 4, so it's been working.
Anybody feel strongly about this one way or another?
Nope.
Okay, I just wanted it noted. Section 502, qualifications. 503. 504. 504.1.
Is that the same issue with the council? I mean, your appointments run out December 31st, and you don't get sworn in until the first, whatever, Monday in January, where there's a break? where-
Right.
Is the-
Well, usually it's at the first
That is at
council
least the
meeting,
first
so-
business day of January here.
So this,
So, yeah, so we talked about that. We could easily do this in, like, December, the last business day in December, swear them in, and have that take effect January 1st.
but it says at or prior to the 1st, so that is something we can do internally without making a change to the charter. We can encourage people to come, right, and we don't. We need to encourage people to come and get sworn in.
Sue's been great to work with. She will just call her, so she'll go down to her office, she'll swear you in the week before, and you've already been elected. And
Yeah.
it saves a step at the first meeting.
So all we have to do is ask city councilors to come in, get sworn in officially, and we could do some sort of a ceremonial swearing in later, right?
Right.
Okay, so no need to change language here.
It actually allows for it, so I don't think there is.
Okay, 504.2. Point 3. Section 505.
So you did notice that 504.3 has the chairperson shall not be elected for more than 3 consecutive one-year.
Chairperson or vice person for more than 3 consecutive one-year terms.
Yep. So it's the same leadership that we put on.
For mayor,
Yeah. So we put a similar, well, it's longer
except
for
these are
mayor.
3 consecutive one-year terms.
Right. So we used to have that for the town council before we had a mayor, and we had a term limit for the chair there. And when we did the mayor, it's a longer term limit.
Out of curiosity, I guess, when the charter was written, why different?
For the mayor? Well, you
Yep.
were there, John, right? I think it was a lot to do with the fact that you have to get elected now for the mayor. It's different. So
Okay,
I think you threw around, should it be this, should it be that, time limits, yeah.
good enough conversation
It's good because John was here.
had. Okay,
Well, if you want a different perspective, he was here too, so.
I don't think, he doesn't, there we go.
Well, I'm sure we probably spent hours on that topic alone. So kind of like to keep that can of worms sealed for a while longer. It works.
It's working for you.
Yeah, and as far as school committee, I think that was written after Stackpole spent 16 years as chair, I think. Is he listening?
He's there. Gave you the thumbs up. Okay, so no strong feeling to adjust this language. For them, it's working. 505.1.
Actually, it was 13, Jonathan, but I was on the committee for 15 years.
505.1. 505.2, this is referencing the Budget Committee again, so I think we just need to placehold that. .3. 506. Should we make them meet more?
Yeah.
Why do they get
They
July
will-
and August off? Come on.
Because they asked for it, because they had a smart school committee at the time we were writing the charter, and
Or
they made
why-
us put that
or
in.
why doesn't the council get July and August off?
Oh, boy.
Trust me, it's a little boring in July and August.
Is August off these days, Jonathan? And how about July? So,
There's a little difference in the school and the city in the calendar, I think.
Goes back to the 5 school committee members are at a lot of meetings.
Yep.
They basically have to have one live meeting a month where it's official, and then the rest of it, they have a ton of meetings. They
Yeah,
meet every week. Don't you meet every week?
I was being tongue-in-cheek. We're good. 5:07.
sometimes it feels we meet
Nope,
every week.
we're still back.
But typically, we have the 2 meetings a month, and then in between there is when subcommittees or,
This, I would have 4 meetings today. This one, John Rue's taking the safety committee this afternoon, and then we've got an executive session and a regular meeting tonight, so it's only Monday.
Monday is your heavy day. Meetings.
I have a question.
Go ahead, John.
Just out of curiosity. What would be the, where it says, "except may otherwise be provided by the laws of the state of Maine"? When would they be making exceptions to meetings?
Last sentence of section 506.
those would be the executive sessions that you would have when you're talking about student disciplinary hearings or personnel hearings. The ones probably pretty consistent with the city in terms of what has to be done in executive session and what can be done in public.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a good question. Section 507.
You guys get paid too?
Half as much. I would just want that in the records.
Article
Twice
6.
the
And we
work.
probably
You
haven't
forgot
been
that
following that because it's been the same and we just keep it going. Yeah.
Like I said,
We
last
thank you
time
for
we
your
had
service.
increases rolling.
I kind of gum over that because I don't want them figuring out what their hourly rate is. So we kind of just, that's usually not one of the perks of selling that to
Hold.
people.
1 second. Diane, it's not public comment, but go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I submitted some comments about this section. I'm sorry I was late to the meeting this morning. I was wondering if you got that comment, sir.
We did. We addressed it at the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And actually, there's more. We have set aside comments because there are sections, you made comment in sections 6 and 7 that we just haven't gotten to yet, but we will retain that for when we get to that. Okay. So that concludes section 5, or Article 5. Now we're on to Article 6. So Article 6 is the budget. So I don't know what is going to be the best way to address this. If we go section by section, it's all going to be, because they're all interrelated with each other, and I think there has to be, I think we maybe have to have a 100,000-foot discussion first, to which everything would then follow. So, do we even have a budget committee? Do we need to have that discussion at a general level first, or should the powers that are currently accrued to budget committee go to a subcommittee of the city council, as an example? Do we need to change our fiscal year? No.
You will bleed cash to change your fiscal year.
Okay. So these are big, to me, it's almost, we could just keep going section by section, and then I think we're just going to keep running into questions that bring us back to a bigger question. So do we just want to have a general discussion of
like
budget
that
committee versus
approach.
no budget committee first?
I like that approach.
I was
you?
told that the budget section was the most important section that they wanted dealt with, but I have no clue what the problem is with the budget,
Right.
budget committee.
I think, I'll just speak for the city council, it's hard to find budget committee members to serve. And it was becoming hard to find finance. It's just like the town meeting. It was going down, down, down. Warrant committee was difficult. And then you get a finance committee, you think it's a reasonable size, it's smaller than the warrant committee, and we still can't get people to run, so you're appointing a lot of people. So we're like, okay, let's appoint people to the budget committee. And you make it even smaller so that we can find people. And thankfully, we got 4 people this year. Because in other years, we've been pulling teeth to get people to serve. And I think I understand why, is because when you get to it, you can talk about the overall picture. How much can a taxpayer afford? You can't discuss what the school committees can readjust and spend as the school committee needs to serve the kids. And the same actually happens on the municipal side. You end up doing an overall, okay, this is what the taxpayer can afford, let's get down within the lines. But ultimately, if the city manager or the city council needs to make adjustments, they need to make adjustments. The other part is, we deal with the budget all year long. It's constant. We understand revenue sharing, we understand TIFs, we sadly understand all the school side at the same time and the school is complex. And then we're constantly having 4 new people, and it's a re-education period. And I think that's where we've discussed, would it be easier to have school committee members and city council members serve as a budget committee? Do we need public members if we do that? So that's where I would be going.
I see Paul and Bob's hands both up. Paul, I'll go to you first.
I guess I was going to say, why don't we have an overview from the school and city managers to give us an idea of what some of their highlights will be that determine whether we slide through things or highlight some items.
I don't want to speak out of turn. I think the school is here not so much to give, you didn't come prepared for any kind of presentation about what you need. It was more just to be here as a resource and give input as you needed through the process, right, Matt?
Sure. Yep, but at the same time, I'll do my best to answer any questions that are given.
Yep. We'll come back to that, okay, Paul? Because I think we'll end up probably hearing from both of them as we go. Bob, I saw your hand. I
think we lost Bob.
I see another hand. I can't see that far.
No, it's just Paul's,
That's
but
Paul.
Bob seems to have lost connection.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that happens sometime with him, sometimes, a lot.
So there's there's that point of view. There's also the point of view that says that obviously the risk in giving all that authority to the city council is, I mean, they have the authority anyway. I guess we should be clear there. The budget committee is a non-decision-making body. The city council ultimately has the authority to approve the budget as recommended them by the budget committee. So in some ways, the budget committee, as it's currently construed, is a unnecessary redundance.
The council can also amend the budget too, can't they change?
From what the budget committee presents?
Right.
Yes. They can, and they generally do. There are usually minor revisions that come in that at least my experience, that the council will request and change based on their perceptions. So, yeah.
Most of us remember when there was the finance, what was it called, the Finance Review Committee, that I think self-proclaimed experts, and that they really ran the city and how the money was going to be spent, yet they had, well, even after the warrant committee, and then, so the Charter Commission, I sat on with Bob and Maura and others for a long time, kind of watered it down and were far more clear that the Budget Review Committee had no authority, yet it did have a check and balance. I remember then getting on the school committee and Superintendent Theoharity saying, what'd you do that for? Because I still believe today that the council, the buck stops somewhere beyond city manager buck. It's the council from the taxpayer standpoint. So I still believe to some degree in the Budget Review Committee, and I get it why some may not like it. Steve, you made a comment, maybe the first meeting, that this year was a good relationship between the city and school, and I would agree, as well as the Budget Committee. It was like, wow, wouldn't that be great if that happened all the time? But if you change the names at any point, or any city council, school committee, city manager, superintendent, it can go south fast, and I think that's where the Budget Review Committee can play a role, because they're, for the most part, taxpayers still having I know it's a long, arduous process, more meetings, more hours, I get it. But I do have a concern of eliminating it.
Go ahead, Steve.
This is a 10-year evolution, almost 11 years now. So when I was interviewing for this position, the research I was doing, the Charter Commission was had wrapped, you had your draft, right? You had your draft charter out there, and I read that intently, and it's like, this looks very familiar to me, because I'd worked under a charter that had been in effect since 1967, was approved by the state legislature. This looks very familiar. This is a well-written charter. I paused on some of the aspects, then I started to learn the evolutionary process that the Charter Commission had gone through, several derivations, because I went back one more charter and was reading that. So you can see that evolutionary process. And in reviewing for this, I read through the Charter Commission's minutes, and I saw that derivation there yet again. The history of the lack of participation for getting, the elected members to a town meeting format, harder and harder to do that. Same thing on the warrant committee, getting the elected people to do that. Couldn't get, pulling people off the street to get a quorum, the lack of involvement in that process. So there's that. And then and I'll skip forward to the overarching aspect of why Sanford became a city. You are a representative republic now. You vote in your elected officials. And you vote them in specifically to be, in the council situation, they are the legislative body of the city. They became your town meeting was replaced by your 7 councilors. They are the legislative body. So when you look under Title 30A, which constructs the political subdivisions of the state, being municipalities, you can look at all of that law as to what the legislative body's authority is. Just take the legislative body out and put city council in. There it is in the law. Under the Department of Education, you go to Title 20A, and you look at the authority there. It's vested in the school board, the school committee. You can see that in the law as to their authority and how that interrelates to the legislative body, which is now the city council, and the Board of Education. So there's all of that. So I see that derivation, and no different than you just spoke a moment ago, Maura, the difficulty in getting people engaged in this process. They've disengaged from it. They care about what happens in their taxes. They don't like it when somebody gets in their pocket more than what they think. Everybody pays too much in taxes. That's a given. I find the budget committee process to be non-productive. It's not, if I had that same five-week period of a year, and I sat before the 7 elected councilors and the 5 elected school board members, and we talked about our combined budgets and how they interrelate and how we manage the overall resources of property taxation within our community, I think that is a much more productive conversation. I recognize that you would want some faction of, the public represented in there to speak the people's voice. I just don't know how effectively you accomplish that, because unless there's good institutional memory and knowledge coming along with that, you spend all your time bringing the conversation to speed, right? And then you're getting towards the tail end, and it's tough for those individuals that are getting this for the first time, way too much information, to make an effective decision. And then it's a recommendation at most. It's just a recommendation, and then the council picks that back up. They make a decision on the number. School board, school's budget goes out for referendum vote, and once that's handed back to the Board of Education, it's in your bailiwick, right? They're not perfecting that any further. And if you look at what truly happens under state law, this whole budget validation at the local level is a useless process as well, but that state law is defined. So, for example, if what comes out of the work product is sent to a municipal vote in June, because this happened to us once since I've been here, and it's voted down because of the time of separation that's mandatory in the state law, you can't have another election before taxes are committed. We commit the taxes on exactly what went out for that voter referendum, because that is the law. We commit the taxes on the last approved budget by the legislative body, which is the city council. It went up for referendum, you vote no on it. We commit taxes on exactly that. And then you come back and you vote something different, which would maybe impact the subsequent year, but that year's your tax bill didn't change because of a yes or no vote on that budget. The whole thing is broke. But back to just the budget committee process. I look back at my notes. We had this in here since starting in, I think, 2017 for the council to consider amendments to the Budget Committee that would keep the Budget Committee process, timing, and everything in place. But it would be comprised of the 7 elected councilors and the 5 elected school board members. You simply change the membership. All of that timing and the resulting recommendation would still go back to the city council ultimately, because then you're not getting into any revisionary aspect. You're not changing the ultimate authority that's spelled out in state law and the charter for the approval process as far as the legislative body is concerned. But it puts those 12 elected members that the people have elected specifically for those purposes in the room for a minimum of 5 meetings out of the month to hammer this thing out. Thank you.
I have comment too, but go ahead, Bob.
Right. So I'm gonna call on Maura and Jonathan, who were part of this discussion 10 years ago. First of all, I respectfully disagree with the city manager. We've discussed this before. I think the 12-member committee looks too much to me like the old finance committee. Once again, you get into too many cooks. We talked about this 10 years ago. I was on the side of just eliminating the budget committee, and that the budget goes to the city council. What the work that is done now at the budget committee is done by the city council members. I don't believe, the argument has always been that's too much work for the city council. I don't believe that's true. School committee does this work. They have extra nights that they meet and they go through their budget process. At least they did when I was chair. Things may have changed. That was a long time ago, as Jonathan points out. That was a joke, Jonathan. So I think that the budget committee, let's call it that, is redundant. Now let's go back briefly to what I said about responsibility and efficiency that we were trying to build into this process when we worked on the charter 10 years ago. First of all, we were trying to streamline the city processes and improve efficiency. As has been said by the city manager, the current budget process doesn't contribute to our overall efficiency. It doesn't necessarily commit to the public's understanding or help with the public's understanding of the budget process, because we all see the people watching the audience for the budget committee. It's there's the budget. The school committee meetings are much better attended. So the other thing is, who's the buck stop with, right? Well, now it stops with the city council appropriately. But we get back into, remember I did this type thing, right? So a city council member, and I'm speaking hypothetically, a city council member can just not do any homework, not look at the budget, say the budget committee's done all that work for me. I'm just going to go with the budget committee recommendations, put my hand up, it's done. The city council needs to be where the buck stops, and the voters need that. Okay, the voters don't vote in members of the budget committee, but voters vote in city councilors. And if I'm a budget slasher that's causing all kinds of problems in this community as a city councilor, then I think the citizens have the choice. Once again, we don't like that guy's politics or that girl's politics or woman's politics. We don't like that. I'm voting against him. Okay, right now it's a personality contest for our city council and a lot of other offices. But if you put the responsibility where it belongs, I believe, with the councilors have to educate themselves. They have to understand the finances of the city, so it enhances their understanding. Again, hypothetically, future councils, it enhances their understanding, and it also brings accountability to the process in the sense that the voters have a real choice, okay? This guy votes for everything, and my taxes are going up and I don't like it. Okay, well, then that person's not going to vote for that counselor, or vice versa. He's a budget slasher, he's hurting whatever aspects, recreation, education, whatever, within our community. We need to get rid of this person and get somebody in here who's a more even-keeled person with regard to the budget. So I have been on the side of eliminating the budget committee for a long time, 10 years at least, and that's what I think that this revision should seriously consider. Efficiency and accountability is what we need. That's what we focused on 10 years ago. This was a piece that we didn't do. I believe this is correct, and other former committee members can correct me. Remember, we were going to convert to a city, incorporate as a city, and we eliminated town meeting. Okay? We were concerned that if we eliminated the budget committee, the charter wouldn't pass. So we didn't eliminate. I was convinced, get off your whatever soapbox and just let it go, because if we eliminate the budget committee, then the charter may not pass. I think that might be a consideration now, but I still believe the right thing to do is to consolidate responsibility, accountability with the council.
Thanks, Bob. So
Currently, the voters don't have a right to either pass the budget as approved by the council because of what happened.
on the
And
municipal-
That's something we have to discuss.
on the municipal side,
But if we turn down the school budget, you're saying that because the council already approved it, that budget goes into effect automatically?
I'm speaking of the timing, when you look at state law, right? You look at state law, I can remember the delay in bringing that back up for a revote on that. The state law is specific that if that can't occur before your taxes are committed, you commit your taxes based upon that budget that was passed by the legislative body.
Can you comment, because I hear what might be happening here, can you comment on how you feel about a municipal election coming back?
Oh, I wouldn't support that. As I said in my second interview here, one of the then town councilors interviewing me said, "You're banking way too much that this charter is going to pass. It will never pass." I said, "Yes, it will, because it's time you grew up." So to me, this is about growing up as a city, right? As being that representative form of governance that goes to the efficiency, the expediency, and the accountability, right? I can be an angry person flailing my arms at a public hearing or on the budget committee or such like that, knowing that whatever I'm flailing my arms about has no impact, because I'm not responsible. The people that are elected are highly responsible to the people that elected them to this city. When they're making their informed decisions, there's accountability there.
so, go ahead.
So I guess first off, if we suggest doing away with the budget committee, I think that's a big step. I think getting back to Jonathan's point, careful what you ask for. I do agree completely with Steve, though, on everything he just said. So would it be worth looking at some kind of a middle ground? If it's too many people, would you want 3 counselors, 3 school committee members, and chair it with the mayor to put everybody who's responsible for the end product in charge? And perhaps it would be work that would lessen the work of the council in the end. I don't know. I've never been part of this process. I've certainly watched it from afar many times.
The council is consistently involved with the budget.
But the school
As the
committee
school committee is too.
isn't. That's a missing,
No, school
no.
committee is part of they're
constant.
constantly part of their
not
budget.
on the budget committee. So
But
what I'm
they're
saying
not
is,
represented on the budget
now
committee.
you have 4 unelected members. If you go to 3 counselors, or they could be different numbers, 3 counselors, 3 school committee members, chair it by the mayor, these are all elected officials that are responsible in the end. Just a thought.
I have a comment here, and I'm in kind of a unique position, I feel, which makes me surprised that I was volunteered to be on this committee. So I'm exactly the problem in some ways. So I'm a citizen who knows/knew nothing about municipal finances, who Mayor Cody asked to be part of the budget committee starting back in 2013-14. Would never have. So let's put it this way. Let's say we go this way, and there's no budget committee, there's no citizen input, anything like that. So I'm taking a contrarian argument here. Mayor Cody would have never gotten involved. I would have never gotten involved. Certain discussions, I learned a lot through that. Certain discussions that we have ended up having regarding, the school bond, the road bond, the sustainability, all of those conversations. And I'm not trying to make a commentary on city council, but I don't think those were brought forward by city council for the most part. Those were brought forward by the budget committee. Not saying that city council doesn't also bring forward things, but in defense of the budget committee, I think there has been input there that budget committee members have had over time that has been valuable to the community. And if we give that up completely, then we've got sort of power and money all in a kind of a governmental vacuum where outside ideas are maybe not looked at. I don't know whether that's true or not. I also don't necessarily know, one issue that I've had as part of the budget committee. I think I'm the one who, my last budget committee is the one that's saying I don't think there should be a budget committee. I think I got frustrated at the end of it and was just like, I don't think I should have a job. But I don't know how much effort there is really given by the council over the course of an entire calendar year to having a 10-year plan or a 20-year plan or a 5-year plan or anything beyond the current fiscal year plan for what the budget might be. And it's scary because there are decisions that have been made in the last couple years, let's say, that you wonder if they would have been differently if there was a longer term versus we're just trying to get through this fiscal year kind of situation. I don't know how much of that exists, and maybe I just don't see it. But I don't ever hear a lot of pushback from the council regarding the budget. And I don't know where to go with that other than to say that another way we could go is to have instead of getting rid of the budget committee, you could choose to, and I'm not supporting this, we could go back to having an elected budget committee, but I don't know the authority that they would have. You certainly need, the system that we have now is not good. You can't have members of the community look at this for a month and listen to the city councilor and listen to the school committee and listen to their budget and have any idea. I'm fairly versed financially, like I can get through the conversations and I can have maybe some semi-valid input on some things, but goodness, like the way that the process is right now for any citizen to sit through that whole thing and have any meaningful input is just unrealistic. So it has to change one way or the other, but I don't want to go full bore down a road of let's just establish a subcommittee of the council and have that be where we go without considering maybe another option that it could work differently.
So, and my concern with that is, so my opinion is, those are people-driven, it's not budget committee-driven, okay? So why wouldn't you want to instead encourage those people to run for city council? Because those are good people when they're thinking like this. And so you're talking about instead, okay, I don't trust who's running for city council. So I'm, instead of trying to run for city council and make that board better, I'm going to run for the competing board and try to make everything difficult. And so like you have these two crashing committees, and ultimately someone has to have the final authority, and the charter gives the final authority for the budget in the city council. So thereby, again, running for finance committee is a frustrating, just I'm there to knock heads, but I have no authority. And that's what happened when we decided, well, this isn't working as an elected position. Again, we're not getting people to run because they're realizing that there is no authority in that. I'd love to see, to be honest with you, I'm tired of doing the city council. I'd love to see better people running so that, I'm like, okay, this is in good hands. I can step away and I'm not trying to attack people who've run. But at the same time, there are people who don't understand the budget. I've served on the city council with people who don't understand the budget, and that's who we're having run. I'd rather see you run. I mean, as like much as we'd probably knock heads about certain issues, I'd rather knock heads with the person who's intelligent and understands the budget and comes up with great ideas and come to some sort of compromise on ideas than to be shaking my head trying to consistently explain or have Steve explain bits and pieces of what we do. And I'm sure the school committee has had the same problem in the past. And that's why I'm like, setting up another competing is always saying, well, I don't have good enough counselors, so we got to do something to protect the budget. And that's what this discussion is like every single charter committee I've sat on. Every single one. It's like, let's just get better people to run for city council, for school. And that sounds really obnoxious to say that, but at the same time, it has been true. During the however many years I've been doing this, since 2004, there have been some difficult city councilors who don't, and great people who just don't pay attention to the budget. They don't care.
Yep, and there's probably, 100 people in the community at least that could, serve in that capacity. Go ahead.
If I can jump up another 100,000 feet, I
We're
keep
way up
hearing
there.
that there's no authority, which I guess technically there isn't, but this is how representative forms of government work. Look at the state legislature. Look at Congress. They have committees that discuss these things, that hash these things out, and it then goes to a vote of the full body in the end. I see that is exactly what's happening here. To say that a budget committee that meets for a month has no power, what they do, what they say is heard. It's public meetings. There's plenty of opportunity for power there. I think the difference here is that we're putting a majority in there of unelected appointed people. I would see more of a value having those elected officials from both of these bodies go on to this budget committee and, quite honestly, forcing them to work together.
Okay, so let me interrupt for a second because that's a key point. So do we have power in the charter to sort of, because again, we want to keep the conversation to what we are really able to do here. We could get into to Jonathan's point of like how we run the budget. We could delve into things that aren't our purview. Would we have authority to sort of dictate in the charter how such a committee would work through the year? Could we, is there any language in there that would sort of dictate how that whole budgeting process would need to work within the city council? I don't.
Well, I'm not-
Or are we back to like we don't want to
change that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying maybe changing what the budget committee is comprised of.
Well, that would be the simple change of it's comprised of either a subcommittee of representative school committee members and city council members or the entire city council / school committee, right?
Yep.
You're talking those parameters.
If you want to keep, and I'm just going to add as an aside, if you want to keep public members appointed or elected, I think you need to lengthen the term. Like, we don't just appoint them annually. Like, if you're going to jump on the
agree.
finance / budget, and you're going to be a public member of that board, however we have the final makeup, you need to sit there for 3 years, because you need to stop having to repeat how school finance works and how municipal finance works annually. Because I sit at that first meeting and second meeting, and I'm like, this is like the same conversation, and because I understand it, and I have to sit through it, and I understand you have to educate the people there. We have some really intelligent people on the budget committee. You've been awesome. I'd love to have people like that sit on the budget discussion and give that fresh set of eyes. How do we do that? Is it just them coming make public comments, or is it them sitting and engaging with school committee and city councilors in that process and put a fresh set of eyes on it? That's what we're talking about, is a fresh set of eyes.
Yep.
So, yeah. So I keep listening intently. I'm trying to find the solution, how the public representation, the public beyond the elected officials comes in. So let me just pitch this out here. I think the public comment, the public input comes in way too late from this perspective. So, I was almost at a point of frustration this year in saying, look, budget committee, there's 5 lines in this whole thing that you have any say on, right? Years ago in the town meeting format, I stood before my small hometown and I gave a presentation on You know, at the end of the day, you're voting on like 50 warrant articles here. 35, 40 of those 50s have already been predetermined. So you think you have all of this clout, and you just really don't, but there's all of that. It's the
Thanks for
public-
telling me that 7 years late.
Yeah, no,
No,
but,
but the discussions with you were
I figured it,
awesome,
I
and
figured
don't
it out
think-
eventually, but
I don't think Steve would give up on the discussions that we had with you over the
oh
years.
no, we could trade spreadsheets, and Lance did his
No,
whole
he was-
self-analysis, and, oh, is this right or wrong?
You know, and having him involved has been great.
I'm
So-
joking.
But
Go
it's-
ahead,
It's
sorry.
the public input part is coming in too late. So by the time, you know, I've worked with the council on putting the municipal budget together, and I've got directives as to where I'm going and, you know, what I'm doing and not doing with that. School board has gone through all of that process and whatnot. And then you're pitching it out to the budget committee. 90% of the heavy lifting's been done, right? And then the budget committee picks it up. You know, I spend one night presenting, they spend a second night presenting, and then that third night is out for public input, right? And public input has been almost nil, right? Oh, I got a pothole, or I want, you know, be sure and restore the trails funding. That's been about it for the last three, four plus years.
I've had input there too.
Yeah, and just a quick point. We need to recognize that there hasn't been a problem here. Okay, this process has worked without a lot of controversy for the past 10 years.
But
Okay.
Bob, I don't know that that's true. And I also don't know that controversy is necessarily bad.
Well, okay, but I go back to, and I'm sorry, I go back to standing on the town meeting floor and arguing for the school articles. Okay, 60 to 70% of my political capital as chairman of the school committee was finances, was budget, going to, you know, and I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to touch that. I don't want to be reading about Sanford on the front page of the Portland Press Herald, how they're not getting along, how they're fighting with each other, how we have, it was just a terrible scene. And we've worked ourselves out of this through the past 20 years with the charter and in the previous charter 10 years ago. I want us, and I'm being fairly passionate about this, I want us to not go backwards. And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about expanding the budget committee, when we talk about gathering all the information. I want the budget process to be more efficient. I want counselors to have to be engaged and understand the finances. And again, that's a hypothetical. I'm not saying counselors are not engaged now, but you have different levels of engagement on the council even today. I want it to be more efficient. I want the council engaged and accountability at the top. Now, and I think we're coming in as part of this discussion that the council, the buck already stops with the council. So if you have a budget committee, they're paper tigers. And that's what we're talking about. The paper tigers, they recommend, okay? But what happens is, again, you get a counselor says, I'm just going with the budget committee's recommendation. They don't engage. And I don't think that's positive for the community. So again, efficiency, accountability, I don't know how you solve the public input piece.
Right, because we as, on our end, you know, as a citizen, we can't force that engagement. And in this committee, we can't force that engagement. We're going to make a decision.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Well, only by voting people out.
By eliminating the budget committee.
Well, no, that doesn't do anything. If you make the argument that the council's not engaged now, just eliminating the budget committee doesn't engage the council.
Well, okay. So as a counselor, again, going back to Steve Buck's comment, elected officials, if they know there's no fallback position, okay? All right, see, you know, another hypothetical. I'm in the grocery store. Someone comes up to me and says, you know, why the hell are taxes so high? I can just say, well, you know, it's the budget committee. The budget committee made all these recommendations. I just followed the budget committee's recommendations. It's a perfect out for me as a politician if I want to use it. You take out the budget committee. Bob, why did you vote for the increase in taxes? Okay, what's your logic? And I have to have logic, I have to have a response, or else I look like a dope. Okay, and I have to be engaged.
Okay.
Eliminating the budget committee engages the city council at a much deeper level than what's happening right now.
Okay, I see that. Paul, did you have, excuse me, David, did you have a point? Did I see
Oh,
you?
I'm just listening.
Okay, sorry. Thought I saw a hand. I
Processing.
thought I saw a hand somewhere. Okay, shift gears, broader conversation. I had kind of a flow chart here of kind of ways we could go. If we want to engage the final authority, again, already is with the council. If you wanted to say, get rid of the budget committee and just have all the decision-making power in this body without real input other than through public comment, let's say, then I think we have to have on the table, the community has to be represented. And so the lack of vote on the municipal side of the budget, I don't know what our authority here is. It's a topic we're going to have to talk about anyway because it's already been asked in question. Does the public already still votes on the school side of the budget? Should the public be, if we're going to put all that power there, should the public still be able to vote annually on the municipal side of the budget?
Yes.
Where does the buck stop?
I think they should be able to.
Yes.
And you could do it the way you did before. If 20 or 25% of the voters that voted in the last gubernatorial election don't vote, if it's below that, then the budget passes no matter what the vote is.
So in any single vote, if 25% of the people don't vote, the budget passes.
Less than 25%, and even if the people who voted down, it still passes.
But there's no, you give up, if that happens 5 years in a row, you give up your right to that.
Not if the elected officials are doing that. I mean, if an elected official, you don't like the way he handles the budget, you may have to wait 2 or 3 years to vote him out.
Yep.
Unless you recall. I don't know what the recall thing is.
Let me go to Jonathan first.
Look, I still go to, what do you want to pass or not pass when you bring this forward, whatever it is you're bringing forward. So back when we talked about eliminating, and there was the discussion of eliminating the Finance Committee, Bob said it right, we kept this portion of it in so that the charter would pass. And in the end, it was really going from town to city that almost sunk it. And the city did help as far as getting to the mayor's coalition, whatever it is. That was helpful to Sanford. So
But
I worry about what you conclude.
are you saying to get rid of budget committee? But I think if you get rid of budget committee at the same time, give the vote back.
Look,
So I'd like
elected
to know what
officials,
large
hold on.
community in the state actually votes on their budget.
There we go, because that's a discussion that's had. Who votes on their, so there's a discussion that's been had that, most large municipalities do not have a vote on their budget.
The 7 councilors and the 5 school committee members are elected members of the community. We are the public.
Go ahead, Steve.
And so I want to get back to my earlier point, but I worked under a charter where the authority was so stringently defined that you couldn't even citizens petition anything to do with the budget off the table. But what I was trying to get to earlier was, I hear this, finding this balance of citizen input, beyond or on top of the elected officials. How is that a meaningful process? And my earlier discussion was really about that input, be it as ineffective as it seems to be to me now, is too late in the process. That should be, if you're going to find that balance with citizens' input, it needs to be far earlier in the process before the council really puts their work product into that ensuing budget, and the same thing on the school side. So they truly have a stronger understanding of what the citizens are looking for in that particular year. That's somewhat perilous in, early in the process. We don't know what our funding's going to be as far as the broad-based taxation from EPS or revenue sharing and others and such under that. But I hearken back to when the councilors were saying to me, when I'm talking about fire stations and this kind of things, until you fix the roads, that's the priority. Until you fix the roads, nothing else, right? And the citizens voted that way when that was developed at budget committee level and discussed and then put up for a bond. You know, the Ys, they drilled down on that. So how do you get that kind of citizens' input early in the process, right? If that's the balance, you know, the citizens want to retain some level of input that's meaningful. I have to keep emphasizing meaningful input because I will sit here with a straight face after 10 years of doing this with the budget committee and say that wasn't necessarily meaningful.
When do the departments start formulating their budget? In January?
October,
October? Wow.
capital improvements and budget formation starts in October. So
Well, maybe that's-
what have I got? I've got July and August and September. There's 3 months out of the year that isn't a primary focus.
So one of the things, and it's jumping off of that, when we had a town meeting form of government, practically the only thing they would cut was capital improvements or things that they could actually touch and feel. They realized that we couldn't negotiate the contract, some of that's fixed. The health insurance fixed, that this is fixed, and that's fixed, and that's fixed. Okay, so what can we actually affect to keep our taxes low? Capital improvements.
Health insurance.
They can't touch health insurance, but.
They can. They cut the line. You have to figure out something else to do. and they did
Which
that
ends up
years ago.
actually, when they don't want to, then the city council stares at it and say, well, we can't cut health insurance because that's contractual.
Well,
So
then unless you have a public vote on it.
ultimately, you came down to capital improvements. Guess why our roads are in the condition they are? Because we kept cutting capital improvements. And I explain that consistently to people. We're still trying to fix that because that always seems to get cut every time we come to an economic downturn. You know, that it's very difficult when there's so much contractually. So you put it out to vote, they're mad at the number, okay, so what can you cut? Not a ton, not what they think you're gonna cut. You have to cut things that they would prefer you to keep in. And unfortunately, that's the discussion at the city council level that they can't change. So when they get another budget back to vote on, they're going to vote the lower number, but they're going to be, if they were actually paying attention, they're going to be pissed at what actually they lost in that lower number. It's sports in the schools. And sometimes that's all you can turn to, and they don't want to cut sports. So that's, you know, and I know Lance has a lot of ideas on, you know, readjusting how we do our finances, which is great, which is why he was such a valuable member of the budget committee. But when you just put it out to a vote, they're not voting for that. They're voting for a bottom line. So if I were to sit here and decide what I'd prefer to keep, I'd prefer to keep the budget committee process, maybe with a few tweaks, and not go out to vote, because it's at least a better discussion, and it's an understood discussion. Not go out to vote, because that's just voting on a number. I'd rather stick with the budget committee process, which is an engaged conversation.
You're saying, you're using my kind of choice, if you had to make a choice. Vote or budget committee process. You'd keep budget committee versus, and it doesn't have to be an either or, but of that choice.
So no matter what we change here, the citizens still get to vote on it, correct?
Not on the municipal side, not
No, I
unless,
mean, if we cut out the budget committee in this, they still vote on that, right?
Or that's a later section down in the 700. That's
yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but it's all
Seven.
related. So as of now, nobody.
No, I'm not talking about voting on the budget, but if we do away or
Oh, yes, sorry.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
make the
That's true.
budget committee, they could turn it down.
Yeah, you know, do you want to,
Yeah.
propose eliminating the budget committee or whatever, and people say yes or no to that.
Right, okay.
And, you know, to getting it to pass, people might vote yes on getting rid of the budget committee if it meant, yes, I get to keep my vote, or vice versa.
Budget committee is more valuable than a vote.
So I think I've made
Because one
my-
happens
my-
early and one happens late, I get that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think I've made my position clear, but I want to also add that if we're to keep the budget committee, which again, I'm going to say is a paper tiger, but at the same time, I am open to the idea of adding membership from the school committee. I do think that may have been an oversight in the previous charter that we didn't include, you know, at least one member of the school committee on the budget committee. So I would be in favor of increasing it by one and adding a school committee
Thanks,
member.
Bob. Can I ask your guys' opinion on this? Like, would that be viewed as positive on your end, having a role in the budget committee, or is it just unnecessary at this point because you've already done your work on your end, and to you it's just another set of meetings that you'd have to attend? Plan B?
I'd recognize Plan B, but also with Plan A, I always, from a superintendent's point of view, I always look forward to Ronnie's email about who's on the budget committee. I start with that because right now that's important for us from a school perspective. You mentioned earlier sometimes you get people in there who are supporters or slashers. I worry about that, and then after the first meeting I can usually get a handle on in terms of where that is. That's important for us because ultimately, and I'm not saying I want rubber stamps, I want to be able to make sure it's not going to get something that ultimately gets through the budget committee that's going to be then passed on to the city council, because we've invested a lot of time in that budget, and I'm not sure everyone has the ins and outs that they need. If they've been doing it for time, I think that's an important piece for people to be able to have that perspective, be able to help us. So I get the idea of A, but I'd also say if the budget committee is going to continue, I'd like to see school committee representation on that as a voting member, just because they have much more experience in terms of diving deeper into that budget that through our best efforts is hard to do in that in that month's time.
So to Matt's comment, so another, if I'm not mistaken, another option would be to keep the budget committee, but eliminate the public members of the budget committee.
Yeah.
We still, for references of all of this, we keep the budget committee, but it's comprised of 3 school committee members and
You could potentially go with 2 school committee members, 3 city councilors, keep the 4 members of the public. That's only adding 2 people. But I would make, again, I'm going to urge 3-year terms. They sign up for 3 years, so we're not constantly, rediscussing the basics. But it would be nice. I mean, it's adding 2 people.
And I was not suggesting eliminating the public. I was suggesting adding school committee representation.
I agree with
Same
Steve
as
that
Maura just said.
well,
they need to start the process much earlier. I mean, if you just pull somebody off the street and put them on the budget committee, they have no clue what's going on if they've never done a budget before. And if they start at the beginning to see what's going on, it would be much more
But
educational, I think, for them.
I'm going to say that the budget is consistent. You're assigning contracts, you're discussing, health insurance, you're discussing the need for certain pieces of roads that went bad and you've got to readjust the money. And so you're constantly discussing the budget on the city council, which is the reason the city council should be the ultimate authority, because, we make all these decisions through the year, and we should understand the budget very well. And those who don't understand the budget very well just vote on just random, their votes very random. They don't understand what they're voting on.
see,
It's emotional. And so if we're going to keep a budget committee process, they're still missing a lot. They're still missing a lot not being city councilors.
so let me make a counter argument to that. I would say your comment about how much is involved in there, about knowing all the ins and outs of the city budget. I, as a citizen, will never know all the ins and outs of the city or the school budget. And I might say, as a counselor, maybe you spend too much time on that and not enough time on the strategy piece, the longer term. Do you really need to be involved? Does anybody in the budget committee, city council or otherwise, really need to be involved in the department by department, line item by line item, et cetera? Or if you're going to spend just as much time, would that time be better used developing like the 10-year strategy and having kind of a preordained kind of way you want to go about making decisions that is almost predetermined with input from what they're doing on their budgets? You know what I mean? Like,
Well, it's not that we don't not.
as a citizen, well, okay. I get it struck me when you said we spend so much time and it's so much whatever, and I'm like, if I was a counselor, I don't think I would even want to be spending my time that way.
Well, you have to discuss consistently when you're going to fit stuff into When can we do this? How far down the road is this project going to be done? Where do you have to save up?
I'm probably not communicating, yeah, I know what you mean.
You are, Lance. The difference is Maura's been on the council
Too long.
for several terms, and she knows it. I've been on the school committee now, this is my 9th year, and it's not that I know it like Matt or Cheryl do, or Ronnie does in the city, or Steve, but I can hear him talk, go, okay, and school committee typically says, okay, Matt, what are your priorities? What does the administrative team want? What are the principals? What are the department heads? I'm not going to micromanage his job or his job. How can I? I don't do it every day. You learn after many years. Someone new, we've got some new school committee members now, that hadn't been through the budget process, and I could tell by their questions. I said, there's a budget review committee, and the city council ultimately will say, I'm being a little facetious, here's your allowance, spend it accordingly.
Well, that's kind of the point I was getting at, is again, it seems to me that it almost works backwards, because they're presenting what they want on one end, and that's great, and then people come in after and think about cutting or not cutting, and it becomes a reviewing of the line items, and you're right. You know way more about it than I do and about how it works. It's just, it would get frustrating, as if I was in your position, it would get frustrating. I'd rather have the plan in place where that back in November, when they're making their decisions, they already know, don't ask me for more than this. Because that's what we've decided over the last 3 or 4 years, that's kind of what our budget is, and start there.
And actually, if you want that, the city council needs to be the final authority and to be the end-all and be-all, along with the school committee.
Yeah, and
That's what you want.
Well, and I'm saying that I think that I would support that if I knew that system was taking place. We're wandering here, but I think it's a good conversation.
That's a great conversation.
Yeah, let me also add that I've been pushing, and I think we do have some at the council level, not as many as I'd like, but regularly quarterly financial updates that come to the council that are on the agenda. Public can hear it, and I think if we just looked at those financials reports and said, okay, these are essentially budget committee or budget related reports, counselors, that you need to pay attention to, and we do those throughout the year, the public can tune into those and so on and so forth. So I think there's a way to manage the timeline within the council, given the existing framework that we have. And the budget meetings, again, going back to the school committee, I sat in 3-4 night budget committee meetings. We used to do them 3 or 4 nights in a row. You may see Matt nodding, you may still do that. We're talking 3 or 4 additional meetings for city councilors. There's no reason why they can't do that work in addition to everything else. My opinion.
Yep. Steve, I want to go to you. Yeah, I wanted to go to you anyway. I kind of wanted to know if you understand, or if I'm communicating well enough in what I'm thinking to have that even make sense, or if I'm wandering too much. You also had your own thing to say.
So I feel one of my jobs as a municipal manager, you listen, you try to identify where the consensus is going and work in that direction. So, strengthening public input being meaningful in the process is a huge part of all of this. I would continue to advocate for accountability. I'd have all 7 counselors and I'd have all 5 school board members, and then put your public board, whatever that is, 3, 4, 5, I don't care how many people are sitting in the room, put them in that budget committee review process. The reason I want to have both sides of the elected officials at the table is, like Matt and I sit with our chair and vice chair and mayor and deputy mayor. We sit once a month and we talk about the more global issues, the overarching, facilities. What are you doing when you're negotiating the next labor agreement? What about insurances and also all of that sort of deal? It's not that the city influences their side or they're influencing our, but it's that concerted coordination of the conversation taking place on a regular basis. If you're going to turn a building over to me, the city, you're going to turn it back. I want to know ahead of time. What's the game plan? Those kind of things.
Quick comment. I think I've gotten the sense that I think we're all on board with that, with school committee being represented in that way, right?
Well, but I'm not okay with having some of the counselors and some of the school, I want them.
You want them all.
In there, right? Because of the level of engagement, as Bob has spoke before, if they're either in it or they're out, right?
And accountability.
The accountability. Because I have had in the past, I've had counselors that they pick up a recommendation and they go with it with little to no research in there. And I find that concerning.
So all members of the community are sitting through whatever sort of meetings, all members of school committee and budget, city council are sitting through all these meetings, getting this information,
You
is
could
what
do
you're
one
saying.
in October before you start, and then just consistently have them until, you know, there's a final product as you guys are working on it as a school side and.
I think it's important that, you know, so you have a larger expense budget than the city. You also get much more state funding than the city does. But when you look at the tax bill, it's about 50-50 split for the net call out for taxation. I think it's important that the city councilors have a strong understanding of the school board's commitments and what they have to deal with, and vice versa, because as we play that back and forth, you know, last year, school department had a knock it out of the ballpark year as far as didn't need any taxation, city did. Flip just slightly this year and such like that. It's having that continuum in the, you know, from year to year to year to year. That only comes with your elected officials, and then insert your public input as far as, you know, the community's bigger picture vision on what they want. You know, we want roads next, we want this, we want that, we feel this about education, we feel this about the municipal operations and such, and then we incorporate that as best can be.
None of that sounds bad. I don't know how that public participation gets in there, you know, as far as being, seems to me unnecessary for the public to actually be on that committee. They're not voting, or, I don't, we don't have to cross that bridge yet, but kind of as a general framework. Putting the municipal side back on to vote, you felt positively that would be a positive. You're not necessarily positive on that. How do you feel about that? You're a no.
It's an emotional vote.
It's an uneducated vote for the most part.
I would rather try to make it easier for them to get signatures to get the municipal budget on a ballot if they're upset with what the city council decides. So it only takes so many signatures and you have to have a vote, as opposed, I think it's fairly high right now.
It's 1,000.
No, they can petition for that right now.
5% of the registered voters? Yeah, which is, what is it now?
A little over 1,000. Okay.
By 750 maybe.
But you're saying that you don't think this can even be done that way?
No, it can.
Oh, can, okay.
They can petition now.
And you're saying make it easier for that?
Yeah, make
Okay.
it like, you know, however we think it would be, this is enough of a obstacle that they're not going to do it every year. They're only going to do it when they're really upset with the numbers. And then they can petition and have it. And we could finish our budget, you know, preliminary budget early enough for them to be able to.
Maura, respectfully, I think you're going to have people are going to step up and go gather those signatures every year, no matter what. Taxes could go down, and they're still going to, if it's 250 people to force a vote on it, they're going to go get the 250 signatures.
But you'd still have the
750 seems to be a pretty good threshold, but.
But you still have the threshold, they have to have 25% of the prior, you still have those types of thresholds too. So if they're, you know, people would have to think they're going to get enough people out to vote to make a difference.
Right, and that, I guess my comment centers around lowering the threshold too much. So you just have somebody who becomes the budget person within the community, you know, a private individual who's like, well, we're not going to let them get away with that. I'm going to go out and get signatures every year, and I'm going to force this vote. I mean, I said before, and so I won't harp on this, I'm very concerned about some of these votes and a certain percentage of the the citizenry being able to hijack the budget and get it passed with a low number of votes. And then you can't get out of that hole. They just come out and they're negative, negative, negative. We're in, I was going to say this earlier, I think we have to recognize that we're in a good place right now. Everybody gets along. The process seems to be working. Yeah, it could be working better, but it seems to be working. But we're in a good place right now. I come from a remembrance and a look to the future when we weren't in such a good place. We have a business city manager and a superintendent, as was said, who talk together, who work together. We have financial people on both sides, business manager and on the city side, who talk to each other. This is why we put wording in the previous charter that there would be a monthly reconciliation of finances between the city and the schools. We want the communication to happen. We've driven that communication to happen. I don't want us to take a step backwards. Again, I've said enough about that. So,
Thanks, Bob. I think we're just about up against time. We have time for a few more comments if we need them, but we have, and by the way, we're bogged down here. We didn't even get into section 6, but I think that's okay. We have this meeting, the next meeting, and I think the next meeting all like in the calendar basically for 6 and 7. And I think the way of approaching this hopefully is okay with everybody, because I think once we sort of come to some sort of decision, everything else will flow from it, right?
yes.
I agree.
In general, with what Steve was talking about, does anybody have an issue with school committee being represented on the budget committee? I think.
Nope, not unless the school committee does.
Steve's saying all versus some. Do we have any energy around that?
I kind of like that, the more
Yeah.
he explains it.
Yeah.
And the other comment I'll make is that the city made a decision to move to a representative form of government. And as soon as you start talking about mixing votes in and lowering the bar for the referendums, I don't know, I think you're asking for trouble on that. Stick with representative, and if you're not happy with your representative, you know what, you vote them out next time.
Yep.
That's the way that works.
Yeah, but I think people are just pissed when their taxes go up. And I know inflation, everything goes up, but, that's a big thing for especially older people that are living on fixed incomes. I mean, if it's just a 1 or 2% increase every year, maybe they'd be okay, but, if it goes above and beyond that, and
Painful.
you got the solar project down at the airport, and, the high school, we weren't going to have to pay for that, and of course, we did vote to give them some money, but. Yes,
I
theater
think
production was awesome this weekend, I agree.
I think for me, like,
Well worth the money.
I think for me, in a perfect world, I think I said this back at budget committee time, was if I don't need to vote and I don't need to be a part of a budget committee. If I felt like if I had information available to me throughout the year that sort of listed out what the council's priorities were and what the budget was and what the goals for the future next 5 years budget was, and that was all public, and then there was some kind of like monthly or quarterly reporting against progress, against goal, and a way for me to be able to provide feedback or ask questions and have it be public and out there. That's all I need. I don't need to vote on an individual budget. I don't know enough to be able to do it, but I know enough to be able to kind of know and determine kind of what a long-term plan is. I think sometimes what's missing here is just that ability to be able to see exactly as a citizen, like what we're doing, why we're doing it. Why are we making the decisions we're making? And to have you guys be able to say like, okay, good question. Thank you for asking. Per the plan we made 2 years ago, this is why we're investing the money this way, and this is the revenue that we're hoping to get back out of this investment, or XYZ. If there was a more able to find a back and forth where I was able to provide input, then I don't need to vote. That's my own view on that.
I would encourage everybody to think about, we've got, I think, really two large conversations here. We've got Councilor Stackpole talking about ripping the Band-Aid off, the final part of the evolution, and eradicating the budget committee, and then, we've got The other piece of that is perhaps that's so much that, everything goes down in flames and some level of amendment in there is the next step in this process of getting ultimately to where the community will be in the future. So I would just encourage everybody to think about those two schools of thought. Because really it's one or the other.
Yeah.
It's either leave it alone, do nothing, rip the Band-Aid off and do away with it, or make significant amendments to it. That's the three pieces.
I don't know, I don't get the sense that doing nothing is, I think everybody wants to do something. I don't think that doing nothing is on the table.
All right.
Just a reminder, the Budget Committee pretty much did nothing to the budget as presented. So it is a person-driven. You don't have
Yeah.
certain people. It's just a conversation for 4 weeks.
Yeah, also quickly,
Understood on
I
that.
consider the budget meetings, the televised budget meetings that we do have, that's the educational piece for the community. That's what I've considered. I don't know how many, I've done it 3 years. I don't know how many years you've done it, Lance. But that's what I've always considered education for the public.
But that could easily, sorry, Bob, that could easily
That's all right,
be,
go ahead.
that could easily be a televised meeting to 7 city councilors and 5 school committee members, right? Same exact,
Absolutely.
Steve could be making the
Yeah,
exact same
it can be,
presentation.
yeah.
Matt could
I
be
think you
making
still get into too many cooks, but whatever.
Yep. Other comments? All right.
Would
Sorry,
it
go
be
ahead, John.
possible to have the 3 council members, 3 school committee members, and have 3 public appointed people that would be in early on in the process?
Anything's possible.
Yeah, these are all, this is the time to have that discussion, so
Yeah, I completely understand what you two are saying, about it being kind of redundant and not of value. But I really do feel that the people are going to feel like they're not have any participation without being, even if it's an 3 appointed individuals that would have some, qualified input, rather than having just somebody voted in.
and I don't want to push back on that idea, but I think what council might say is they're having trouble, what is there, 4 appointed positions now? They're having trouble every year finding 4 willing people to do it as it stands.
I think I was the most contentious on there this year, too. So they would agree.
So I agree with you in print. If we had a pool of people that were like submitting their application to the city every year to be part of the budget committee and people really wanted to do it, I would be 100% on board with that. But the challenge is finding even 3 people who really want to do it.
Who can commit themselves.
Everybody goes into the budget season knowing that the taxpayers don't want an increase in their taxes. Yet wages go up, health insurance goes up. If you do nothing, if the council said 0% increase, then the school's looking at layoffs, because it's all about people. And so you know that going in. I'm sure the city is very similar. Where you don't get the new police cruisers, or you don't get the things that the taxpayers actually want. So taxes are gonna continue to go up, or we don't improve the city.
Point taken. Counter argument is revenues go up too. Doesn't necessarily.
Which is the big piece of this year.
Okay.
Evaluations also go up.
Valuations, which is part of revenue.
That was part of the hard part last
Yeah.
year, is the revenue, where the revenue went up.
All right. Next agenda item is adjourn. So any more discussions before we adjourn? I think we should just be thinking about this conversation and kind of where we want to go with it. We've sort of laid out some options. I'm going to go back and look at the meeting minutes myself so I can kind of remember what some of the things that we've talked about are. I don't know
I
if
think I
we.
just used the wrong word when I said recommendation. I'll adjust that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back through the first part of this meeting to get all of those.
And if we can, kind of come to a decision sometime early in the next meeting about sort of the general direction we want to go, I think we can kind of go with the section by section thing a lot easier. So,
This was a good approach for this section.
all right, no other comments. We'll consider ourselves adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Can I just remind everyone, the next